Life is full of people who lift us up and some who tear us down. The hard truth is you can't always avoid toxic people. They may show up at work, in your family, or even in your circle of friends, but here's the good news: you don't have to lose yourself trying to deal with them. In fact, the way you respond to toxicity can become your greatest strength. Today, let's talk about how to handle toxic people without losing who you are. Toxic people thrive on making you question yourself. They chip away at your confidence, they twist your words, they exaggerate your flaws, and before you know it, you start wondering if maybe they're right about you. That's the trap. And once you fall into it, you start living from a place of defense instead of a place of strength. You become reactive, second-guessing every move, walking on eggshells just to avoid their criticism or negativity. That's exactly what they want, because the more uncertain you are about yourself, the easier you are to control. But here's the truth: who you are does not change based on their opinion. Your value doesn't shrink because someone refuses to see it. Your worth doesn't disappear just because they try to downplay it. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the right one, and just because someone has the ability to make noise in your life doesn't mean they get to write your story. You have to stay grounded in your identity, even when their words are trying to shake you. Think of it like a tree in a storm. The wind can whip through the branches, the rain can pound on the leaves, but the roots, that's what keeps the tree standing. Toxic people are like that storm, unpredictable and sometimes overwhelming, but if your roots are deep enough, you won't be moved. Those roots are your values, your principles, your sense of self. They're the reminders of who you are when the noise of others tries to drown it out. And this is where it gets practical. Grounding yourself means building habits that remind you of your own worth. It's the way you talk to yourself when no one's around. It's what you repeat in your head when you're tempted to believe their version of you. It's standing in front of the mirror and reminding yourself that you're more than the label someone tried to slap on you. When they say you're not good enough, you go back to the evidence of the times you proved that wrong. When they call you difficult, you remember the times you stood up for yourself with integrity. When they try to reduce you to a single flaw, you remember the countless strengths they choose to ignore. Because the moment you forget who you are, you hand over the pen and let them write your identity for you. And once you start living from their script instead of yours, you lose yourself in their toxicity without even realizing it. One of the most exhausting parts about dealing with toxic people is realizing that you can't change them. You can't reason them into kindness. You can't argue them into respect. You can't explain, shout, or give someone who is determined to stay the way they are. That's where so many people burn out, because they spend all their energy trying to fix someone else instead of managing what they actually have power over. And the hard reality is, the only thing you can truly control in that situation is you. Your words, your tone, your reactions, your decisions. That's where your power begins and ends. When you start focusing on controlling them, you enter a losing battle, because every time they refuse to change, it feels like failure. But when you shift the focus inward, it's not about whether they get better, it's about whether you get stronger. And that's where you win. You can't stop someone from being manipulative, but you can decide not to play into their games. You can't stop someone from being negative, but you can decide whether or not you absorb their negativity. You can't stop someone from trying to trigger you, but you can control how much of your peace you're willing to give away. It's like walking through a fire. You can't control the flames, but you can control how you move through it. Some people sprint right into it, letting it consume them. Others stand frozen and let it burn them where they are. But the person who learns to control their steps, their breathing, their focus, they're the one who makes it out. That's the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is when you let them dictate the pace, when you let their toxicity push your buttons until you explode. Responding is when you take a breath, you slow it down, and you choose how to handle it without giving them what they're looking for. And yes, it's hard. It takes practice to pause when someone is trying to provoke you. It takes restraint to keep your voice calm when someone is raising theirs. It takes strength to not match their energy, but to hold on to yours instead. But that's where your growth comes in, because when you realize you don't have to control them to stay in control of yourself, you stop giving them power they never should have had in the first place. When you're around toxic people, it's easy to feel like you're trapped between two impossible choices: either let them walk all over you or cut them out completely. But there's another option, and that's boundaries. Boundaries are not about building walls so high that no one can get through. They're about drawing clear lines that protect your peace, your values, and your mental space. They are not punishments. They're not revenge, and they're not about controlling the other person. They're about deciding how much access someone has to you and your energy. And that decision belongs to you, not them. The problem with toxic people is that they usually don't respect boundaries. In fact, they test them, push them, and sometimes even mock them. But that doesn't mean you stop setting them. It just means you learn to hold them firm. A boundary without consistency is just a wish. If you say you won't engage in shouting matches, then when the shouting starts, you leave the room. If you say you won't respond to insults, then you don't fire back a clever comeback, you stay silent and move on. Boundaries only work when you follow through, and that's where your strength gets tested. Think of boundaries like a fence around your home. You decide where the fence goes, you decide who gets a key to the gate, you decide how far someone can come in. And just like a fence, boundaries don't mean you don't care about people. It just means you care about yourself enough to protect your space. You wouldn't let a stranger walk into your living room and trash the place. So why let someone walk into your mind and do the same? And yes, people will get upset when you set boundaries, especially those who benefited from you not having any before. They'll call you selfish, dramatic, or even difficult. But those labels are not reflections of you, they're reactions to the fact that they no longer have unlimited access to you. People who truly value you will respect your boundaries, even if they don't like them. People who don't respect them reveal exactly why those boundaries were needed in the first place. Boundaries don't push the right people away, they protect you from the wrong ones. And every time you hold that line, you teach others how to treat you without having to raise your voice or lose your dignity. Toxic people thrive on reaction. That's their fuel. They throw out little hooks, sarcasm, backhanded compliments, subtle digs, or straight-up disrespect, just to see if you'll bite. And the moment you do, the moment you snap back, raise your voice, or defend yourself in a way that gets heated, they win. Because now you're playing their game, you're on their turf. And when you're on their turf, they know exactly how to control the outcome. That's why the most powerful move you can make is learning not to take the bait. Not taking the bait doesn't mean you're weak, it doesn't mean you agree with them, and it doesn't mean you're letting them get away with it. It means you're refusing to hand over your emotional energy every time someone dangles provocation in front of you. It's the difference between being a puppet on their strings and being the one who cuts the strings completely. They want to see you flinch, they want to see you explode, because your reaction gives them proof that they can push your buttons whenever they want. But when you don't respond the way they expect, it unsettles them. It takes away their sense of control. Think about a fisherman casting bait into the water. If the fish refuses to bite, nothing happens. The bait just floats there, useless. That's exactly how it works with toxic people. They can cast out insults all day long, but if you refuse to bite, they're left holding empty hooks. And over time, they start to realize that their tricks don't work on you anymore. It takes discipline, though. It's not easy to hear someone say something cutting and choose not to defend yourself in that moment. It's not easy to stay calm when someone is clearly trying to push you over the edge. It feels unnatural because everything in you wants to fire back. But that's exactly why it works. By holding steady, you send a message without even saying a word. I don't operate at your level. And that's not silence from weakness. It's silence from strength. It's choosing your peace over their chaos, your self-control over their drama, and your dignity over their cheap bait. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools you have when dealing with toxic people. We grow up believing that every insult deserves a comeback, every attack needs a defense, and every confrontation has to end with us proving a point. But when you live that way, you end up spending all your energy trying to win arguments that never actually end. Toxic people don't want resolution. They want reaction. And silence is what breaks that cycle. Silence says without words that you refuse to enter their arena. When you stay silent, you take the oxygen out of their fire. Their drama needs fuel. Your anger, your explanations, your defenses. The more you talk, the more material they have to twist, the more words they have to throw back at you. But silence gives them nothing to work with. It's like handing them a microphone that's not even plugged in. They can keep shouting, but the power of their words dies out because there's nothing pushing back. Silence also buys you time. Time to think before you respond. Time to check in with yourself and ask, is this worth my peace? It keeps you from blurting out something in anger that you'll regret later. Silence is not just about shutting your mouth, it's about opening up space for self-control. And in that space, you get clarity, you get perspective. You get the chance to choose your next move instead of handing it over to their manipulation. The strength of silence shows up most when it's least expected. Toxic people often rely on patterns. They say something sharp, and they know you'll snap back. They poke, you push, they jab, you swing. It's a dance they've practiced with you over and over again. But when you stay silent, you break the rhythm. You step out of the dance. And suddenly, they're the ones left looking foolish, flailing around with no partner to keep the fight going. And silence doesn't always mean walking away. Sometimes it's just holding your expression steady while they try to get a rise out of you. Sometimes it's refusing to explain yourself when you know the explanation will never be accepted anyway. Sometimes it's just the quiet strength of knowing that you don't need to prove anything to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. Peace is not something you stumble into. It's something you have to protect on purpose. When you're around toxic people, peace is usually the first thing they try to steal. They do it with constant negativity, with criticism that cuts deeper than it should, with drama that pulls you into battles you never asked to fight. And if you're not careful, you start living on edge without even realizing it. You start waking up already tense, waiting for the next problem, the next comment, the next storm. That's why protecting your peace has to become a priority, because without it, you're not showing up as your best self anywhere else in your life. Protecting your peace doesn't always mean walking away forever. Sometimes it's about creating space in the moment. It's limiting how much time you spend with people who drain you. It's setting boundaries around conversations you won't have anymore. It's knowing when to answer the phone and when to let it ring. Peace is not just about silence or calm surroundings. It's about the decisions you make that keep your mind and heart steady no matter what's happening around you. When you start treating your peace as non-negotiable, everything changes. You stop chasing arguments that don't matter. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't care about understanding you. You stop letting every little jab hook into your emotions. Protecting your peace looks like walking away from gossip instead of feeding it. It looks like excusing yourself from a heated conversation before it spirals. It looks like taking a deep breath when someone tries to bait you and reminding yourself that your calm is worth more than proving a point. And yes, some people will call it selfish when you choose peace over pleasing them. They'll say you're avoiding, you're difficult, you're cold. But those labels usually come from people who benefited from your lack of peace. They're uncomfortable because they can no longer use you as their emotional punching bag. And that's proof that you're doing something right. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish, it makes you responsible. Because when your peace is intact, you think clearer, you speak calmer, and you carry yourself with the kind of strength that toxic people can't take away from you. Toxic people have a way of turning everything into a battle. The smallest disagreement becomes a full-blown argument. A simple comment turns into a debate. Even silence can spark another round of accusations. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself fighting on every single hill they create, wasting your energy on conflicts that never actually move anywhere. Choosing your battles wisely doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart enough to know which fights matter and which ones are traps. Because the truth is, not every comment deserves a response, not every insult requires a comeback, and not every disagreement is worth your time. When you respond to everything, you spread yourself thin. You start giving little pieces of your energy away until there's nothing left for the things that actually deserve it. But when you pause and ask yourself, does this really matter? You start to see the difference between noise and necessity. Some things are just noise designed to pull you off balance. And the moment you realize that, you stop letting yourself get dragged into every single storm. Think of your energy like currency. Every time you engage in an unnecessary argument, you're spending it. And toxic people are experts at getting you to overspend. They'll bait you with something small, then escalate it just enough to keep you hooked. Before you know it, you've spent hours in a conversation that leaves you drained and frustrated with nothing gained. But when you choose your battles, you conserve that currency. You keep it for moments that actually need your strength. And here's the thing. Choosing your battles doesn't mean you never stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean you let everything slide. It means you're selective. You stand firm when it truly matters, when your values, your boundaries, or your dignity are on the line. And when it's just noise, when it's just another attempt to drag you into chaos, you let it pass. That kind of restraint isn't easy because everything in you wants to defend yourself in the moment. But the more you practice it, the more powerful it becomes. Over time, you stop being controlled by every little spark, and you start conserving your fire for the battles that actually count. Walking away is one of the hardest choices you'll ever make when it comes to toxic people, because everything in you wants to believe that maybe if you explain yourself better, if you try harder, if you give them one more chance, things will finally change. But sometimes the most powerful act of strength is not staying and fighting. It's recognizing that the fight is costing you too much. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you gave up too soon. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you finally realized that protecting your future matters more than holding on to a relationship that keeps wounding you. Toxic people thrive when they sense you're unwilling to leave. They know you'll always come back, always tolerate, always been just enough for them to keep repeating the same cycle. And that's why walking away is so disruptive to their control, because it proves you're no longer willing to play by those rules. You're no longer handing them unlimited access to your time, your emotions, or your peace. You're choosing yourself, even if that choice feels heavy in the moment. Sometimes walking away looks dramatic, cutting ties completely, changing jobs, ending relationships. Other times, it's subtle. It's stepping back from conversations that go nowhere. It's not answering the call you know will drain you. It's limiting access instead of giving it freely. Walking away is not always about distance in miles. Sometimes it's about distance and availability. And that distance is what allows you to breathe again. It's not easy because walking away comes with guilt. You'll question yourself, you'll replay moments in your head, you'll wonder if you're making the right call. That's normal. But over time, you realize that every step you take away from toxicity is a step toward clarity. And in that clarity, you start to rediscover yourself, the parts of you that were hidden under all the noise, all the drama, all the manipulation. You realize how much lighter you feel when you're not carrying the weight of someone else's chaos. And that's when it clicks that walking away was never about losing them. It was about finding you again. At the end of the day, handling toxic people isn't about changing them. It's about protecting you. It's about staying grounded in who you are, controlling what you can, setting boundaries, refusing to take the bait, using silence as your strength, guarding your peace, choosing your battles wisely, and knowing when it's time to walk away. You don't have to lose yourself in someone else's chaos. You don't have to match their energy or fight for their approval. You get to decide how much access they have to your life, and you get to choose yourself every single time. Because the strongest version of you is the one that doesn't let someone else's toxicity rewrite your identity or rob you of your peace.